When you have a client configured to use a Win server, what will happen when that client is turned on and it initializes is it will contact the Win server and request a lease for its NetBIOS name. The Win server in turn will check its database. If the NetBIOS name is available, it will grant that client that NetBIOS name, and it will give it a lease period known as a TTL, which stands for time to live. The client will go on functioning normally. Once the client reaches 1/8 of its time to live period, it will try to renew that lease with the Win server. If the Win server is up, it can renew the lease. If the Win server is not up, that client will make that request every 2 minutes and continue to make that request every 2 minutes until half of the time to live is up. Then what it will do is it will switch to the secondary Win server and start making its requests at the secondary Win server. This is why it's so important to have at least 2 Win servers on a network, because if one goes down, at least the machines have a secondary Win server to switch over to. Now let's look at the situation where that Win server already has the NetBIOS name being used in its database. A new machine is initialized on the network and it requests that NetBIOS name. The Win server will check its database, and the database will come up and say, hey, we're already using this NetBIOS name. You can't have it. But what it does before it denies the client is it checks to make sure that the machine that's registered to use that NetBIOS name is still on the network. The way it does this is it sends out a challenge. The challenge goes to that particular machine that's already using the NetBIOS name. If that machine is online, the Win server comes back and says, okay, that name's already registered, and it denies the new client. But let's say, for instance, during that challenge, the client isn't reached. What it will do is it will send 3 requests or 3 challenges to the original client. Now these challenges happen very quick. We're talking 500 milliseconds in between each request. So it does try to resolve the issue very quickly. After that 3rd request, if there's no response, then the Win server turns around and says to the new client requesting the NetBIOS name, okay, it's granted. Now there are a couple different ways that that Win server can have several different computers wanting the same NetBIOS name. One is the administrator who set up the network didn't plan out properly or made a mistake somewhere along the line and named 2 machines the same name. That can happen sometimes. Or what can happen more often is the machine was not shut down properly. Let's say, for instance, the machine crashed. It locked up and you had to physically turn the machine off without going through the shutdown process. If this is the case, that machine did not have a chance to let the Win server know it was shutting down. Because if you shut the machine down properly, it will notify the Win server and it will release its name. Once the name's released, it goes back into the database and the Win server says, okay, this name has been released. That makes it available for the next time you want to bring your machine back up. But if the machine was shut down improperly, the Win server still has that name registered. So most users realize they need to shut a machine down properly. And it's even more important to shut a machine down properly if you have it set up to use Wins.